everyone, it's James Chamberlain, and today I've got some really interesting information for you guys. Not too long ago I released my PC building video where I built a brand new PC to run this channel and to get all of my work done, and that PC has been great to work with, but in that video I didn't really cover much about the performance of the PC, as I wanted to save that for a different video where I could go more into detail and really give you guys the real facts, which is exactly what we're going to do today. In this video I'm going to be going over all of the performance data that I have collected and benchmarked from my new PC. I'm going to be making comparisons to my old machine, my expectations, and I'm also going to be giving you guys thermal information, frame rates, all of that good stuff, editing performance, everything you guys will want to know about how this rig performs and how it helps me to run the channel. I'm also going to be doing a bit of an overview of the build and just giving you guys my thoughts on what my experience building a PC was like and how I felt about doing so. Let's go ahead and begin. I'm a very creative person and I love to create things. I'm also really into tech, so I had an absolute blast building my PC. Throughout the whole process, I just had a great sense of excitement. I was just so happy and thrilled that today was finally the day I got to build a new PC to run the channel. After that great experience, I don't think I'm ever going to be buying a pre-built machine again, as doing so just really robs me of that wonderful experience that is getting to put together your own computer. I had a great time from researching the components all the way up to physically assembling everything, and if you guys are into tech and you like to build things, I highly recommend looking into building your next PC. It's not too hard to do and it's really fun. Now guys, to get into the juicy stuff, the stuff that you guys really want to hear about, let's begin by going over some performance data. To start off with, of course, basic desktop usage. It should be no surprise that this PC performs great for things like browsing the web, watching videos, all of that basic stuff. This machine is a pleasure to use. Then again though, my old PC never really struggled to do anything on the internet, never really any issues there, and to be honest, pretty much any modern decent system shouldn't have any trouble at all browsing the web and doing basic stuff there. Thanks to our NVMe SSD and the fact that the system is entirely solid state powered, this system is blazing fast and snappy around Windows. Things come up nearly the same instant that I click them, everything is just really quick, and I rarely get loading cursors, which is awesome because it saves me a whole lot of time and just makes using the computer feel a lot more free and smooth. Now guys, next up, what I know all of you guys are just really wanting to see me go into, let's get into the gaming performance of this rig and how this computer performs running games from mild to wild, how the machine performs, thermals, all of that good stuff will be covered here. To begin with, obviously, this computer performs extremely well running games, especially considering I'm just playing in 1080p with a 165Hz refresh rate monitor. I consistently get high refresh rate experiences everything looks great. I max all my games and it's just buttery smooth and amazing. Some might say that this level of hardware is a bit excessive for 1080p gaming, but in my opinion it is all the better to give me nicer, smoother experiences, as well as to open up the door for 4K in the future. Plus, I really do use this system's power for things like productivity work and producing these videos, so in the end it all works out and is very useful to me. For recording and streaming as well, of course, the computer has no problem at all streaming or recording. It does great, and most of the time I can't even tell OBS is running and recording in the background, or even streaming for that matter. Between the dedicated encoding chip on the RTX 3080 Ti, as well as the i9's 10 cores, this system does a great job chewing through streaming and recording. In terms of individual games, most combat first-person shooter games, I average between 300 to 500 FPS with settings entirely maxed, as would again be expected with a PC packing that type of power in 1080p resolution. I did take the liberty of running Cyberpunk 2077, and though I really am sickened by the morals and values that that game pushes, as well as the excessive use of language there, I must be honest and say that it is a great looking game. Props to those developers for creating a really nice graphically looking game. Graphical fidelity is top notch, and all of the different colors, the way the reflections blend are just amazing, especially with RTX on. This is a situation where I am super thankful for the power of an RTX 3080 Ti, even if I am only playing in 1080p. This card is still quite literally given a run for its money just at 1080p resolution with everything fully maxed in Cyberpunk. With DLSS off, running at 1080p, the game looks amazing, everything looks super sharp, super great, but unfortunately the frame rate just isn't something that I am super impressed with. With DLSS off and everything fully maxed, again at 1080p, I get between 50 to 70 FPS, which isn't a bad frame rate, but considering that this is an RTX 3080 Ti paired with a Core i9, and we're talking about just 1080p resolution here, I'm not particularly impressed with those numbers, but once I turn DLSS on, it's a whole different story and the game performs much better. With DLSS set to quality and ray tracing drop down just one notch, the frame rate is between the high 90s and low hundreds, and it will occasionally go up to 120, enabling a borderline high refresh rate experience depending on where you are in the map. The game looks great, it's really smooth, and this is definitely the way that I play on this PC. Cyberpunk is the only game that gave me a little bit of trouble while recording, and I was able to notice a performance hit when recording. It would be anywhere from a 7 to 10 FPS drop, and I could truly feel it while playing the game, and it wasn't particularly comfortable. I did make sure I was using a properly set up game capture, recording at 1080p 60 FPS with a bitrate of 30,000 inside of OBS, but even with these optimized settings, I still just wasn't getting the greatest performance while recording, and there was a little bit of a drop there and I could feel it. Shadow of the Tomb Raider is another one of those great looking games that runs quite well on this PC, fully maxed with ray tracing all the way up. I streamed that game quite a while ago and had a wonderful time doing it, and got multiple comments about the fidelity of the game and how well it was running on my PC. For gaming, I give this PC an 8 out of 10 performance-wise, which in my books is very, very good. I think that the PC is very capable of gaming. I will say that I don't think it would satisfy my needs if I did make the jump to 4K, as I really wouldn't be getting too many high refresh rate experiences here. Compared to my old PC, it should be no surprise that this computer is far better, as would be expected coming from a GTX 1060 and AMD FX 8320 to a Core i9 with a 3080 Ti. The difference is miles apart. I didn't game much on my old PC, but running things like Forza Horizon 3, Sea of Thieves, and other common popular titles that aren't particularly demanding, I got between 50 to 70 FPS on medium and high settings. It was, however, a playable experience and got the job done, but I did long for a little bit more considering my high refresh rate monitor. As for Roblox, this is where things get extremely interesting. As I'm sure all of you guys know, Roblox is a major focus of this channel and it is absolutely miserably optimized. On my old PC, I was always troubled with all sorts of frame rate drops, lag, delays. It was horrible and miserable, and it really did just make producing videos quite a pain and took away a lot of my inspiration to create content for you guys, where this new PC has kind of helped me get back into the rhythm and not feel so bad when recording. Despite the 8-core CPU and fairly good graphics card, the PC still just didn't perform great at all, and Roblox didn't cope well with anything. Games like Jailbreak ran around 40 FPS. In Ultimate Driving, one of the games that gave me the most trouble, FPS would hover around the 40s and 30s, but would consistently run as low as high or mid 20s, which was not playable and was not a fun experience. A fairly big mansion in a game like Bloxburg or Rowville would tank my frame rate, and it could easily get down into the 30s or less, and it was just, again, a pretty choppy and not fun experience, plus it added a lot of input delay to the game. I must, however, point out that those low frame rates were far from the worst trouble I had when running Roblox on my old PC. I almost always got this really bad delay where if I pressed a key or moved my mouse, it would take upwards of 1 second for the Roblox client to respond and actually carry out my action. Sometimes it could take as long as 3 seconds, and then when the game finally did respond, it would combine all of my keystrokes like a video and fast forward, sometimes resulting in deaths in competitive games or mistakes when building, all sorts of trouble that was really frustrating me a ton. The issue was only worsened when recording. The delay would be even longer and it would take even longer for the game to respond, sometimes not registering inputs at all. As for the new PC, this delay is almost never ever present and I've pretty much forgotten about it. Things run so much better and frame rates are frequently above 60 even in the more demanding Roblox games. In more basic games like simulators, frame rate on Roblox is always between like 300 to 500 and is just insane and ridiculous. Roblox frame rate does vary quite often though, and it can alternate between a couple hundred FPS in just a few milliseconds. If you've ever looked at that FPS counter with the FPS unlocker, you guys will know what I mean. Don't think that my experience is perfect though, I definitely do get quite a bit of drops below 60. All it takes is a large Rowville or Bloxburg house, or a more demanding game like Jailbreak or Ultimate Driving, and things can hover around 40 to 50 FPS on unlucky days, and things can even drop as low as like the 20s or 30s if I'm loading in assets or doing something more complex with the platform. Roblox truly is a lot easier to record and more pleasurable to create videos on than it's ever been before, and I am really thankful for this improved performance. If any of you out there are thinking that a new PC or laptop will improve your Roblox performance and perfect your gameplay experience, you are most likely wrong, as it really does not get much better than the hardware in this PC behind me, and I can say right now that even this still does not always perform super well on Roblox, or rather, Roblox does not perform well on this PC, as the problem is definitely rooted within Roblox and not within my hardware. Lastly guys, in terms of our performance metrics, we have productivity performance. This is an area where I think you will see the most surprising results, and I most certainly did here. I was not expecting the performance that I got out of this PC. I was expecting things to be very different from how they end up actually being. I do all of my editing in DaVinci Resolve 17, and all of the benchmarks produced here are from DaVinci Resolve, so do keep that in mind as we go through this. Resolve is not a particularly poorly optimized program. In fact, quite the opposite. Resolve is quite well optimized compared to a lot of your other NLEs and professional editing softwares. My old PC in the free version of DaVinci Resolve 16 and 17 always performed to a miserably low degree and just gave me lots of trouble. Scrolling through 1080p 30 and 60 FPS footage was not very smooth. There was always some input delay, things were quite choppy. Once I added a couple layered clips to the timeline or started adding on things like color grades and video effects, I quickly got nothing more than a slideshow out of my real-time playback, and even turning down the resolution just didn't help too much. Usually if I needed to render a video, I would go ahead and set up the computer to render and then go to sleep, wake up the next morning and have my render done, or I would go out and get some work done around the house while waiting for the render. On my new computer, most renders of the same type, length, and settings complete so fast it's not even worth getting up from my desk, as the render's only going to take a couple minutes. It is just a night and day difference. Projects that used to take hours to create will only take a couple minutes to get done now, which really simplifies my life and makes editing a much more simple process. Thanks to the fact that I've now upgraded to DaVinci Resolve Studio, I can even render using my graphics card's NVENC encoder instead of the CPU, which sometimes will speed things up and make renders even faster. This, guys, does not mean that my editing experience is without its flaws, and indeed I must say that editing is still not perfect, even on a PC like this. There are times where a certain transition or color grade will just really bog down even this PC, and it really starts to struggle and just barely chew through the work. The majority of my gaming content is recorded in 1080p 60 FPS with an MP4 format and bitrate of 30,000, which isn't a particularly easy format to edit, but nonetheless, considering the degree of this hardware and the fact that the resolution is only 1080p, there really shouldn't be any trouble at all there. Unfortunately though, I do still run into some hangups while editing my gaming videos. Overall, guys, editing is a way better experience on this new PC, and it really brings back a lot of that inspiration that I had lost due to poor performance and lots of frustrations. Now, guys, before I bring to you the final verdict, I want to go over the thermal performance at this computer, as it's definitely not a complete or comprehensive PC analysis review if we don't go over thermals. Initially, the fans were ramping up like crazy and the computer was quite noisy, and I quickly came to find out that there was a BIOS applied overclock that was extremely aggressive and was being very hard on the CPU. Under load or any type of stress, the cooling just was not sufficient to handle that comfortably, and I was getting very close to thermal throttling territory. The moment I tried to do a Cinebench run or any type of video render, temperatures would head up to 90 degrees and sometimes hit nearly 100. I'd definitely be wary of automatic BIOS overclocks, as they can be very aggressive on your system hardware and can actually end up causing long-term damage due to the high voltages they pump out and the high heat to the components. Clock speed stays above 4 GHz even at idle. Once I put the CPU under any type of load, it immediately heads up to its max turbo and sits at 4.88 GHz, which is basically that 4.9 GHz max turbo, and it will not drop down from that speed until the task is complete or that window is closed. I ran prolonged Cinebench R23 runs back to back to saturate the coolant and get the CPU up to max temperature under full load. It stayed around the high 70s but didn't really exceed 80 at all. Things were a bit toasty, but it was well within the comfortable limits of the processor and was well with the design spec. As for GPU temperatures, this is of course an RTX 3080 Ti, and it's not just any 3080 Ti, it's EVGA's for the win 3. Because this graphics card is so extreme and it is factory overclocked to such a high degree, the card does run very hot to say the least. It stays within EVGA's advertised specifications, but nonetheless it's a very, very hot card. During intensive gaming, the GPU stays in high 70s and seems to like to sit at 80 degrees in very intensive games, which is quite hot. Again though, this is within EVGA's target, so I wouldn't be too worried, but undervolting is always an option if I am too concerned about how hot the graphics card is running. Throughout all of my testing, the GPU remained at or above EVGA's maximum turbo boost that was advertised, which is very, very good, and that means that the card is performing properly, and it was doing great there. This PC is able to keep its hardware reasonably cool during both light and heavy work, so I am not concerned whatsoever there, but I will say that the analogy and joke about PCs being space heaters is unfortunately all too true for me. If I get into some super intense games, it really does feel like a heater blowing on my legs under the desk, and that does get a little bit uncomfortable down there. And in addition to that, I must say that the computer is capable of raising the overall temperature of the room quite a bit. After just a half hour of running my Cyberpunk thermal benchmark, the room started to get noticeably warmer, especially around my desk. As I continued to play and run my benchmarks, the area around my desk actually started to get uncomfortably hot and became slightly nauseating to me. Alrighty guys, well there you have it. This was the benchmark performance of my new PC. Definitely some surprising results there. I was definitely expecting better editing performance though, and I really would like to see Blackmagic Design go ahead and optimize DaVinci Resolve just a little bit more for some more light consumer grade work like what I do. Nonetheless guys, this PC is far better suited for the type of work that I do here on the channel than my old rig was, and it's made my life so much easier. Almost all of those old hassles of editing and producing video are gone, and that's really made it a lot easier for me to feel inspired to go out here and produce content for you guys. This rig will be of great use to me for years to come, and I cannot wait to see what we have in store for the future. If any of you guys have any questions related to this PC or its performance, please leave them down in the comments. Other than that though, thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy or learn anything, please leave a like and maybe even subscribe. Goodbye everyone.